Story 1. The Netflix marketing team releases memes about shows to give off the appearance that everyone is watching the show. Since people have fear of missing out, they watch the shows to understand the memes until eventually everyone does watch. Story 2. Arresting the people in Jeffrey Epstein's Little Black Book would bring this world to a grinding halt because of how many disgusting, rich people there are in power. Story 3. For me, it's the theory that the trend where people were uploading pictures from now and from 10 years ago was made by Facebook for the whole purpose of training artificial intelligence to recognize and analyze faces' age. Story 4. I believe that mattress stores are 100% a front for money laundering. Who is buying enough mattresses to keep these stores open? Every time I go through the store in my city, I never see people inside. It must be some kind of scheme. Story 5. Our collective perception is seeded, shaped, and guided through all forms of media. I know that most people are aware of that now, but the level at which our perceptions are controlled goes deep into crazy territory. For example, although the submovements that created wokeism all naturally arose to address real problems, they were corrupted and amplified in order to get the non-owner classes lost in distraction and fighting with themselves. Another example, the phrase conspiracy theory didn't emerge until the JFK assassination. That phrase was constructed specifically to make people who are onto something sound crazy. By grouping the plausible and insane theories together under one umbrella, you discredit all of it. And this is not new. This isn't an internet or social media thing. This has been proven to be happening since the early 20th century. Our entire modern society has been shaped for generations. For further reading, check out Edward Bernays. Story 6. That our smart devices, tablets, cell phones, Alexa, Google Home, really are spying on us, tracking our every word and thing we do. Too many times I have been talking to friends in real life about some obscure topic, opened the browser on my phone, and seen advertisements for exactly what we were just talking about. I am convinced, beyond all doubt, the rabbit hole goes down a lot further. Story 7. I firmly believe that we are taught so much about Martin Luther King Jr. and so little about Malcolm X specifically to turn the American populace into a more docile and pliable people. I don't think either of them succeed without the other during the civil rights movements at that time. It's a classic take the carrot or the stick situation. But we're only ever taught about the peaceful protests of Martin Luther King Jr., and we're taught that's the right way to do it. Here's a clue. If a system that generally doesn't want to change is teaching, this is the most effective way to change the system, they're probably lying to you. Story 8. Billionaires are actively working to cause global upset and chaos to emerge as our new dictators in the future. If we looked for solutions now, it would have to be greatest good for the greatest amount of people. This would undoubtedly mean billionaires would have to give up power. But after a few years or decades of chaos, and the billionaires are hiding out in their bunkers, we will be so desperate as a society for peace, we will accept any solution presented to us. Story 9. Certain electronics and other durable goods are built to last just beyond the warranty period and then designed to break. Google Pixel phones, I'm looking at you. Story 10. Epstein was killed. It's crazy to me that it doesn't get more publicity. All of the weird coincidences that had to happen, and he just so happens to have incriminating evidence on some very powerful people. Story 11. Republicans are purposely trying to defund schools to create an uneducated labor class they can underpay for doing critical jobs in society. They do not think charter or private schools are better. They just benefit from an uneducated youth. Story 12. Billionaires are pushing the narratives and using governments to push their personal agendas. See Peter Thiel and JD. Thanks. Be right back. Peter Thiel is suing me now. Story 13. Trump did not get shot. No chance. Evander Holyfield is still missing part of his ear 25 years later. There was and is no sign of an injury from a bullet. Get out of here. Story 14. Lee Harvey Oswald was a rogue agent for the Committee for State Security. The Soviets tasked him with assassinating John F. Kennedy, but they called it off because they were not totally insane. He went and did it anyway. To prevent political leaders from finding out and initiating nuclear World War III, the Central Intelligence Agency and the Committee for State Security worked together to muddy the waters with insane assassination conspiracy theories. Story 15. Michael Jordan served a secret suspension from the National Basketball Association for his gambling problems, and that his dad was murdered by the mob because Jordan wasn't paying his gambling debts. Story 16. We live in a society run by and for the ultra-wealthy who view the rest of us as expendable cogs in the machinery designed to keep them living the lifestyle they are accustomed to, regardless of any consequences beyond their discomfort. Story 17. The United States government killed Martin Luther King. Story 18. The Mandela Effect. I'm old enough to remember a lot of things and young enough to remember them clearly. There are timeline changes that are crazy, and none of it happened until after the European Organization for Nuclear Research was turned on. Story 19. The Democratic Party loses on purpose. Their wealthy donors have no intention of ever letting them actually gain significant power and implement sweeping changes that would make life better for the average working person. So, even when they win elections, they incompetently bungle their way along, taking the high road when the other side goes low, and other nonsense to ensure nothing gets done. Story 20. Captain D's and Long John Silver's are a front for money laundering. I rarely ever, and I mean ever, see a single soul at those establishments. I travel across the country for work, and it is widespread. Story 21. The plane crashing into the Pentagon occurred at the same time, and in the same area of the building, where a massive audit was being conducted to locate trillions of dollars that mysteriously disappeared. Story 22. Iran is a threat to the United States is utter nonsense. With the exception of Russia, China, and possibly India, no country in Europe and Asia has the military capabilities to be a potential threat to the United States. Iran is located in West Asia, and it doesn't have the capabilities or the financial strength to launch an offensive into North America. Story 23. Social media was created to dumb down the American public. YouTube and other platforms make you go down a rabbit hole, and then you start believing outlandish theories because it's on video, and the internet never lies. Story 24. Diversity, equity, and inclusion in video games are caused by bad actors who infiltrated progressive groups and feminists with the goal to discredit said groups, and reaction streamers are making it seem worse. Story 25. My conspiracy theory is that Trump's assassination attempt was set up to boost his chances of winning re-election. What the heck? How did his security allow him to stand up and shout with his fist up shouting, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" behind the American flag photo op? Also, no mark on his ear after removing the bandage. Yes, I know somebody actually died, which makes no sense. And how could he have set up a sniper to shoot so closely without actually harming Trump? Can't answer that, but something about it just doesn't pass the smell test for me. Story 26. Reagan was never hit by his would-be assassin's bullet. At the time, Reagan was the oldest president yet elected. What better way to prove his fitness for office than to have him survive an assassination attempt and even joke about the bullet on the operating table? Real gunman? Yes. Real wounds to others? Yes. To Reagan? No. Story 27. All athletes are juiced. The coaches know it and the sports announcers know it. They have a clever don't ask, don't tell policy. They also have trainers giving them a needle in the bum. The players have plausible deniability. I never knowingly took performance-enhancing drugs. Story 28. My favorite. John F. Kennedy was shot by a Secret Service agent accidentally. The one in the front of the car with him accidentally pulled the trigger of his submachine gun when the car accelerated after the first shot from Lee Harvey Oswald missed. It would have looked spectacularly bad for America if this fact got out, and so it was covered up by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, among others. It just fits so well. Story 29. Lyme disease is a man-made, biological warfare bug that escaped from Plum Island. If anyone is interested in going down a rabbit hole, look up Operation Paperclip and Eric Traub. Story 30. Russians are using Facebook and social media to divide the country into two groups constantly. Mostly I see it as a quiet war. The end game is to convince the Americans that Russia is not the enemy, but the enemy is each other. And the Russians have been doing a great job at creating deep divisions where there weren't any before, or if there was a division, it was small. Vaccines. Anti-vaxxers versus vaccinated. Politics. Democrats versus Republicans. Abortion. Gun control. Climate change. Immigration. Story 31. Big Pharma is suppressing certain cures because it would hurt their profits. Instead of a one-time pill, it's take these pills for the rest of your life. Story 32. Reddit is a left-wing echo chamber, and Twitter is a right-wing echo chamber. On both websites, people deny it, but if you read through both sites, you will realize that they are both insanely biased and not fact-driven. No political side is right, and as soon as people realize that those in power are the problem, no matter who it is, the better the world will be. Power is the ultimate goal of world leaders, and they want people to be split and fighting each other. Story 33. The circus clown is a distraction. There is someone else doing something in the shadows that is hidden from news and public attention because the clown's antics are what people typically pay attention to. A real-world example is that when Donald Trump was president, Mitch McConnell was in the background quietly and deliberately pushing through local and federal judges who were sympathetic to right-wing ideologies. Story 34. In Canada, I fully believe we are witnessing a wealth transfer aimed at widening the wealth gap and trapping most workers and earners in a basic kind of debt slavery. It honestly feels like a kind of neo-feudalism. Ownership class Canadians, who from 2008 to now were in positions to grow portfolios, whether through owned and operated businesses or inherited ownership from their parents, borrow against their assets to acquire more housing to flip into expensive rentals, several times more than what the mortgage itself is worth. Landlords with large amounts of land and larger farming operations can buy more and more quarter sections, locking out anyone new from starting farming or forcing smaller farmers to rent. This, along with maintaining a steady flow of temporary foreign workers to depress the real value of labor, creates a guaranteed pipeline of replaceable and cheap labor. It is aimed at resetting the value of Canada's middle class and eroding any equity middle and lower class people have over their state and the laws it produces. Adding insult to this dynamic, the people who don't believe in paying Canadians the true value of their labor and hire temporary foreign workers just mobilize adjacent media interests to inspire hatred of the foreign worker, instead of the crisis our state created to put us in these circumstances in the first place. Many Canadians fall for that instead of being angry at the ownership class Canadians who are exploiting both foreign labor and laughing their way to the bank, while Canadians are angry at foreigners instead of at them. Canada very much favors the rich, and it feels like we have an oligarchy entrenched between the two parties, Liberal and Conservative, who ever win. Moneyed and lobbying interests cross the floor politically, and both parties meet those interests. Liberal and conservative business owners alike exploit the temporary foreign worker issue to depress wages. Liberal and conservative landowners alike exploit how expensive it is to build or develop housing, enabling them to charge high rentals on properties. The same Canadians are eager to sell off public assets, like Canada's socialized healthcare, to create an American-style for-profit system, no different than how we're gouged across groceries already. If wages ever do reset in terms of the actual purchasing power regular Canadians have against groceries, rent, etc., it will only come after a significant amount of Canadian wealth, land, and housing is more or less consolidated among fewer and fewer people. Then we might finally see wage increases across the board to give the impression that we have resolved the issue of wealth disparity. You might finally earn $28 per hour or something, but it will only be just enough to build savings while renting again. There will be no real competition anymore, just faux competition between an increasingly monopolized and consolidated market. I'm very frustrated that I have lived in places that would only have cost me like $400 or $500 a month mortgage-wise, but because I'm paying $1,200 a month in rent, I can't build savings for a down payment on a mortgage even though I'm capable of meeting that mortgage's demand. Canada needs some kind of equity option for renters that considers the history of what people have paid in rent and allows them to lend to put money down on properties. This would enable regular people with no assets to compete instead of never building assets in spite of clearly being able to afford and support those things. Story 35. Joe Biden never actually caught COVID-19. They just needed an excuse to gracefully remove him from the presidential race because he was losing it. Plus, considering his last few interviews, mixing up Mexico and Egypt and such, he might be in the early stages of dementia. Story 36. There is no terrorist organization in Palestine. It's 100% being used as an excuse to justify a mass genocide of Palestinian people. I mean, really, an Israeli realty company was making plans for a condominium complex days after the West Bank in Gaza was razed to the ground. Story 37. September 11th was an inside job. It only sounds crazy if you listen to the media and don't look into it yourself. Start with David Ray Griffin's excellent books or with Architects and Engineers for September 11th Truth. Story 38. Pumpkin beer is actually made from yams. They released these beers in the fall season well before beer could have been made from pumpkins, which aren't even grown yet. It's the time of year when pumpkin things are trendy, but there's no way for it to be made in that time frame. But what comes in early enough for an artificial substitute is yams.